Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. Nice to see everybody. We're going to have more people joining us, but in the meantime, I'm going to introduce the event. My name is Michelle Cavalcanti, and I work in alumni relations on identifying alumni resources and programming for professional development. Lauren Bradley, as many of you know, is the Director of Student and Young Alumni Engagement, and she is my partner in this event. And while we've invited and welcomed all alumni to join us tonight, it was a group of young alumni who brought the request to Lauren to have an industry-based networking opportunity. So we've done many of these events in the past, but this one was specifically created for alumni to learn about the future of work and to have an opportunity to meet fellow alumni in their industry or in an industry that they're interested in. We have a lot to cover, so I am going to turn it over to our MC for the evening, Shawn Allen. But I first want to tell you a little bit about Shawn Allen. So he graduated from Simon in 2008 with an MBA. He is one of our newest alumni career coaches. And if you are interested in this resource, I think Kayla is going to post the link in the chat. He has also accepted a position of co-chair of the Mentoring and Career Networking Committee for the university's Black Alumni Network recently. And he is the founder of Shawn's Resume Shop, and he's helped hundreds of clients across the country, and he's received amazing reviews for his services. Shawn also creates custom career coaching programs with positive energy and strategic goal development. His Real Goal Setter coaching platform offers personalized sessions designed to prepare clients for a new career, professional search planning, and strategies for advanced opportunities. And if that isn't already impressing you enough, he's also a licensed real estate agent in California and helps clients achieve their real estate goals. So he's got a lot to offer us, and I want to welcome him and thank him for being the MC for this evening. And I'm going to let you start the program, Shawn, so welcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Wow, who wrote that bio? Welcome, everyone. Welcome, good evening, good afternoon, maybe good morning for some calling across the world. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Shawn Allen. I'm excited to be your MC or facilitator for the night. And we are going to cover a lot tonight. This is a very special program. I definitely want to thank everyone involved and all the hosts that you see in the gallery. They're here to help you get to the next level. So what I'm going to do is, before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to lay out the program for tonight. We're going to flow pretty smoothly. We're going to encourage you to use the chat. We're going to encourage you to raise your hand, use the emojis, the thumbs up, and just have fun with it and be really interactive. First 30 minutes, we'll have a short presentation by Joe Testanie. A lot of you know him, but if you don't, he's going to focus on our topic for tonight, which is the future of work. And then we're going to have a Q&A. So same thing, if you have questions you'd like to post in the chat, go ahead and post that. I'll be in the chat as well. And if you'd like to actually speak, then we can spotlight you as well. We have an admin helping out with that as well. And then after that, we're going to hop into something very exciting. My favorite part is going to be the breakout sessions. Breakout sessions will allow you to select and learn and participate in an industry talk that's specific to the industry that interests you. So how will we be able to connect in the world? How will we be able to connect virtually or in person? And what specific recommendations do we have for each industry? You're going to get a chance to participate in that conversation in a smaller group setting. It may be one person, it may be three, it may be four. So anyway, if you scroll through the participants, you'll see some familiar names. I'm happy to say that we have several recent graduates from U of R as well. Class of 2020 is in the house, and they're going to share their experiences and their recommendations and opinions with you. And we will conclude our program, like Michelle said, we won't have the opportunity to have Lauren join us tonight. She had another emergency that popped up, so we might have a little bit of extra time for Q&A. So we'll keep that in mind as well. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker. It's 15 minutes, but it's 15 minutes jam-packed in information. So if you don't know, here's a little bit more information about Joe himself. Joe is the Associate Vice Provost for Career Education Initiatives and the Executive Director of the Green Center for Career Education at the University of Rochester. He has served as a leader in developing and establishing career service standards, assessing the work of the profession, and consulting with organizations in the US and internationally. Joe has spent his career advocating for students and the value of career services within higher education. More recently, he has turned his attention to helping others develop strategic planning initiatives, manage change, and make data-informed decisions to positively and proactively impact higher education. So without further ado, we're going to hear from our keynote speaker tonight. Himself is here. It is the Joe Testanie.
Shawn, thank you so much. I would love it if maybe you do intros for me all the time. That was really great, and I appreciated that. So thank you so much. Pleasure to be here this evening. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and walking you through some thoughts I've been having around the future of work. This is definitely a topic that's been very front of mind for me over the last 3 or 4 years, actually. Been trying to really think about this, absorb a lot of information, and keep track of what's sort of continuing to evolve. And the pandemic only accelerated some of these themes that I'll highlight tonight. And what I hope is that I give you some food for thought as you go into the breakout rooms, and obviously will be some great time to ask some questions at the end that Shawn will facilitate, which I'm looking forward to as well. As Shawn mentioned, throw ideas or questions in the chat. Give a thumbs up if you like what I'm saying. Thankfully, there's no thumbs down, or you have to search for it if you want to give a thumbs down, but feel free to do that as well. But this presentation and some of the themes I'll share today are really kind of a work in progress, because this continues to evolve pretty fast, as we've seen over the last 18 months. And it continues to shift under us, because I think what we think is going to happen over the next few years is evolving. And I think it varies by industry sector, which is why I think I'm really looking forward to the breakout sessions, is for people to think about how this maybe affects different industry sectors differently, and some of the ideas that might really evolve in those sectors. So I'm going to have some slides I'll share. It's going to be quick. I'm a New Yorker originally, grew up on Long Island, so I can get through a lot of content really fast. So I'll burn through that, get to the questions and answers, so we can get to a little bit of a conversation with Shawn. And I'll be able to also make this available to you all afterwards. So feel free to reuse this information afterwards. Reach out to me after if you want to set up a conversation. Always welcome those opportunities to connect with alumni and talk more about this topic. So without further ado, let me get into some of the information and some of the themes, and we'll look forward to the conversation as well. Okay, so first I'll start with this, and that I think this is really helpful as a grounding in terms of how we're thinking about this at the University of Rochester. Most of the themes I'll talk about are a little broader, but for those that are not aware, we've been working to develop this better and stronger career education ecosystem across the institution in all of the schools, really thinking about how do we better engage with industry, how do we involve faculty and really integrate more of career education to the curriculum, thinking about how we can help students and alumni develop competencies and skills, really emphasizing mentorship, thinking about equity and access and what that means around career education, and how we continue to involve alumni as well as support alumni in their careers as they continue past their time at the University of Rochester. So I think this is helpful for me to always share, because I think it kind of frames how we're thinking about this, how I'm thinking about it. And I think it relates to some of the themes that I'll highlight in the next few slides. So there's 4 trends I want to focus on. Like I said, I'm going to give you a pretty high level view of these ideas and concepts, but I think they're really interesting, and they've emerged from a lot of the readings, participating in different panels and workshops that I've been attending, as well as just paying attention to thought leaders in different spaces and reports that are being produced over the last few years, but definitely accelerated over the last 18 months. First trend is about skills. And I think I labeled this skills, because I think if you read anything around higher education right now, or in the space around employers and what they're looking for, there's big emphasis on skills and how to find the right skills, and that varies widely. But I think there's a couple of areas here that I want to focus on. Human work. There was a book written, published by the Alumni Foundation last year around the idea of human work, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. Integration and meaning making skills, and then there's technical skills. So it's not necessarily all about learning how to code and things like that, but there's a lot of value in some of these areas around human work. And the World Economic Forum published this in 2020, and it kind of gives you an idea of the shifting, some of the continued emphasis on certain skills from 2015 to 2020, but you can see a lot of the skills that are highlighted here have nothing to do with maybe specific majors and disciplines, and have more to do with these ideas of meaning making and human skills. Something like emotional intelligence, the ability to interact with people, complex problem solving, creativity. Those aren't things necessarily taught exclusively in certain disciplines, but more so that you're learning either on the job or by taking a variety of courses at an institution while you're here, or continuing to learn after you graduate from the university. So I think this is an important area. And so they go further in the Future of Jobs report in 2020 published, and thinking what's going to be necessary in 2025. And here you see some new ideas coming into play as well around analytic and data analysis and technology, but it's not necessarily, once again, the coding piece, but more so how do you use technology to solve problems? How do you use technology sort of interacting with other issues that might be facing in different industry sectors? Problem solving, your own self and career management, and obviously an emphasis of working with people collectively. And I think what happened over the last 18 months is that, as opposed to being just in person, how do you do that virtually? And I think that's an important element to see and observe. How does that evolve as we move forward with remote working staying here in some industry sectors, where other sectors might be returning to more of a physical in-person presence, but these skills aren't going to go away in terms of their emphasis. I thought these quotes really kind of summarize some of these concepts really well. In terms of the Jamie Meritosis from the Alumni Foundation, he talked about adaptability, and the future is how do we make sure our graduates that are in school right now, but also our alumni that we continue to work with, how do we continue to help them be flexible and adaptable, taking their skills that they're learning in certain industry sectors, applying them to new ones, or emerging jobs and career paths that are starting to present themselves year over year with changes in technology or different industry areas. And the Boston Consulting Group published a report prior to the pandemic, talking really about that the what is going to change all the time, so the how is really critical. And that goes back to those meaning-making skills and the human skills, how we accomplish some of the problems or tackling the problems that we're facing in different industries is going to be really critical. The second trend is looking at long life learning. And you can say the lifelong learning, long life learning, but I think the idea here is continued upskilling, continued reskilling of workforces, and this boom in credentialing. I think this has really exploded a lot over the last 5 years. And if you search anything online about credentials, and whether that's certificates or associate degrees or a variety of other things, there's over 900,000 different certifications and credentials that are in the United States alone. That's a lot, it's a big number, right? And then, so there's a lot going on here. It's a very unregulated kind of space, but the idea is employers in particular want some sort of evidence of how can we identify skills that people have and how do we credential that in some way. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the university setting, as well as in the industry sector, and for employers to provide these different types of skills. And employers, according to that World Economic Forum report that I mentioned earlier, 40% of current workers' core skills, this is in 2020, so once again, right before the pandemic was taking off, are expected to change in the next 5 years. So what that means for companies is that they're having to rethink, how do I reskill people? Am I making partnerships with universities? Am I creating my own opportunities within my organization to reskill my employees? How do I think about reskilling them, because technology is changing, our audiences or our people that we're serving is changing. So how do we keep pace with the evolution of our work that we have in different industry sectors? And the reskilling areas, you can see, correlate back to those top skills that I mentioned earlier, right? So these are areas that employers are investing in terms of reskilling their employees: critical thinking and decision-making, leadership and managing others, advanced data analysis and mathematical skills, project management. Some of them are technical in nature. Some of them go back to that human skill that I mentioned earlier as really, really important areas. So employers, organizations are investing money to reskill the people that they have because they want to retain them. It costs money to hire new people and to lose talent. So how do we retain them? By investing in them. And where are the areas that they're investing in? So you see this overlap between that first area of skill development and this continued lifelong learning of what that looks like. The third trend, industry expansion and contraction. I think the pandemic for sure accelerated some of the areas of certain industry sectors, and we're seeing some rebound now and some staying contracted, but you're seeing this evolution under our feet as it's happening really evolve in front of us. Obviously, retail and travel really changing, right? So while there's some more travel that's happening on a personal level, business travel may not rebound for years, if at all, in some cases. Entrepreneurship and innovation, people took maybe more risks this last year than they might have taken otherwise to solve problems that were presented because of the pandemic or because of some of the social justice movements that happened. You know, obviously having this Eastman School of Music as part of the University of Rochester, we saw the disruption that caused in terms of the music industry and entertainment industry and what that did to our artists here at the university in terms of students as well as alumni. How is that sector going to evolve and shift and change in a really significant way? So some of these are in flux right now, and we're watching how they evolve and what they come out post-pandemic. Others are starting to really kind of show themselves as being really sustainable through the pandemic and look at ways that they might just evolve and change in different ways afterwards. I thought this was a really interesting data point from McKinsey as well. This was a physical proximity score. So if you're on the pessimistic side of things and say, we might have another pandemic in the future, which is obviously not something that we want to see or have, what are the industry sectors or jobs that have a high proximity of people together in one place? And what are ones that have lower areas? Because the ones that had high proximity of people together were significantly impacted by the pandemic because of social distancing and issues that provided the pandemic sort of created. You see leisure and travel, obviously, personal care, medical, care, obviously being high, home support, some of these warehousing and some of these factory issues that we saw. We saw a lot of issues with food processing in some of these areas, right, of really impacting in the supply chain for some of that. And we see that with the chip issue right now. So it's really fascinating to look at this and see how does this evolve and what does this mean for decision making in certain industry sectors for the future. How do you prevent against this? How do you prevent from being impacted negatively in the future? What does this mean for different supply chain and different industry sectors? And how are ways we can guard against that or lean into it or create new ways of doing some of the work that we've done in certain industry sectors? And this last piece of this industry shift is, where are the jobs actually going? Now, this is just one vantage point, and this is by no means, I think, the end all be all. There's a variety of reports being produced pretty much on a regular basis by different entities talking about where the growth in job demand is and where the contraction is. This is in 2020, so this is sort of evolving as we speak, but we know that there's an emphasis on data. There's more big data available, so we need more people to think about and process that information in a way that's meaningful and helpful to the end product or the end goal of an organization. How do we think about AI and machine learning and the impact it might have on different industry sectors? We don't know yet. That's kind of in flux, but we know that there's more people and more job opportunities that exist. And you can see in some of the decreasing job demands, there are things that can be automated, or there are things that can have repetition to them and that can be replaced potentially by machines or by different kinds of work that are making easier to do to evolve. So we're seeing shifts. This is going to continue to evolve with the rate of technology, pace, and change, as well as the acceptance of folks, but this also critically ties back to the reskilling issue. How do we take workers that were in some of these maybe decreasing job areas and then reskill them to be supportive and really move into these growing job areas, which I think is a critical area for a lot of communities, including the city of Rochester. We're really grappling with this issue right now. How do we help our community reskill the people that are here? And that really ties back to the economic development of our city, as well as the growth of the city overall, as well as our school system. So there's this ripple effect that happens in communities like Rochester around jobs. I think it's critical for cities like Rochester to deal with, and the university plays a role in that as well. Last area, new way we work. Obviously, we're all on Zoom right now. I've been working at home for the last 18 months. I'm heading back to campus more and more as the days move forward. Some of you may not be going back to your offices. Others of you may be required to go back to your offices. And we're seeing every day in Wall Street Journal and New York Times, different industries either saying everybody's coming back to work as of July 1, or others are saying, we're going to give you breaks. We're going to pay you different rates depending on where you live, but you can stay remote. So there's more and more control for employees in some cases of where, who, and what, and the time we spend on work. There's more opportunities for entrepreneurial mindsets, maybe creating more side hustles or gig opportunities on the side. But also there's really significant challenges in terms of how our tax codes are written in the United States, what society and structural changes in terms of employers and how we even do remote work and entrepreneurial work or gig economy. And we're not even talking about what that looks like internationally and what that sort of changing landscape may look as well. And this was prior to the pandemic, but this was already on the rise. You know, in 2018, 56 million Americans were doing some sort of freelance work. And this cuts across a lot of different industry sectors. And they've chosen to work this way. So this is not because they had to in many cases. And there's more and more resources to allow for more of this opportunity. So people are maybe opting into or able to opt into. But we also recognize that this does not hit all the sectors of our population equally. This has definitely been skewing towards people that are in higher income brackets, that are majority populations in some cities. So white men, white women, and their abilities to participate in this. And so there's definitely differences in where this hits, and definitely the economic classes, as well as social classes, that people are able to opt into this kind of work. And this last stat, this was a report done earlier, later last year, and we're seeing the pandemic only influence this, right? So the share of freelance workers increased, you know, up from 2019, 2020 during the pandemic. So we're seeing people opt into this kind of work. Once again, this kind of reinforces that trend that this might be something that's here to stay. And companies are starting to look at now, do I have to hire these people full time, or can I contract these people out? Can I contract projects out and work out versus investing in hiring them full time as employees, which is definitely a different shakeup to the industry sectors in certain areas, which has pros and cons. So I don't pass judgment on that, but there's issues on both sides of the equation when we think about employers moving in that direction and thinking of it in that way. So last piece here. This has to do with what we're thinking about the University of Rochester. How do we take some of these concepts and start to work them into the University of Rochester? So one area, how do we move more career education and integrate it with academic experiences and work integrated learning? How do we emphasize internships, research, community engaged learning, practicums in the professional and graduate programs? How do we really think about how to integrate this so students are not only gaining, you know, sort of knowledge from the content, but also learning skills and applied areas of ways they can maybe be ready for different industry areas. Reimagining of what credentials are. We're piloting something in the fall right now at U of R that was influenced by alumni feedback and thoughts. We're creating a UX certificate to really think about user experience and putting together some of the things that we've done at U of R and having our own spin on that. We're going to try it out and see how it works and see what kind of student interest there is. Investing in equitable access career. So that's education, scalability, mentorship are going to be really critical to making sure that all of our students and alumni have access to the information and the resources that we have at the institution, and expanding the relationships we have with students, but also with industry sectors to involve them in different parts of the institution and really inform that. And lastly, how do we help students and alumni build social capital? That's a critical piece of this no matter what. How do we help that along by influencing, but also really making those introduction and brokering the relationships that we think are critical to career success in different industry sectors, but also for our alumni base and our students overall. So I know it's a lot of information. Shawn, I think I kept it pretty close to time, but I know there's a lot, like I said, we'll make this available afterwards. I sent it over to Michelle and happy to share this as you get into your breakout rooms as well. But I'll pause there. We'll see what kind of questions pop up, and I'll kick it back to you, Shawn.
Excellent. Wow. Data driven. Definitely. There's a lot of facts in there.
Yeah.
It really surprised me that when you showed the top skill sets, the top skills that companies are looking for, that if you noticed over that period of time, active listening was one of the ones from 2015, but it wasn't in the 2020. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But critical thinking was.
Yep.
So it is nice to see real information, real data, and to see those trends on what companies are focusing on. So we will open it up for some Q&A, and we're going to keep the program moving after that. So I'll check the chat. Let's see. It looks like Shawn Allen posted twice in the chat. Is there anybody else that wanted to post and forgot to hit the send button? If there's any questions, feel free to use that chat option. If not, you can raise your hand, raise your hand and we will spotlight you. So let's pause for a couple of seconds and see who's going to throw out that first question. Don't all hop up at one time. Here comes one. All right. One in the chat, and I'll go ahead and read it. This is a question or a comment from Alex Chase, class of 2021. Given the current market, what advice do you have for a college grad trying to get their first job? It's a good one, Joe.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, Alex, it depends on the industry sector, because in some cases, things are fine. And in certain industry sectors, in terms of hiring need, it's actually, I think some industry sectors, like in certain technology areas or related to remote working, things like that, they can't find enough people. And they're kind of rebounding in a certain way that they're looking for talent. Other areas are kind of coming out of the malaise that they had over the pandemic that were maybe hit a little bit harder. I think the critical piece of this is connecting with people. I think that's the underbelly of a lot of the work that we have to do when looking for jobs in any industry sector across any economy. And so this group of people right here can be critical to that. Asking advice, seeking, opening doors, connecting with folks to see where the opportunities reside, because many opportunities are never posted on any job board or anything else like that. So it's important to stay connected with folks, take advantage of this Rochester alumni network that I think is really critical, and I think growing in intensity and support. And I think that's a key piece of that. Secondly, is coming back to that skills idea. Do you have the skills that are necessary in the industry sector you're going in, and how can you develop those? There's so many different ways that we're identifying now and providing on through the Green Center, ways for students to build those skills, whether it's taking a 2-week course on Salesforce and getting certified there, taking a course on Coursera and learning a certain skill that might be relevant to an industry sector. So it's looking at the skills that exist, figuring out where your gaps might be, and how do you fill those while you're going and participating in the job search. And I think the last thing I would say is, how do you effectively tell your story? I think this is something probably Shawn has a lot of experience with in thinking about the work that he's done with coaching folks, but it's so important to figure out what your narrative is, what that story is, and what, why you think you can add value to an organization. And that could take the form of a resume or a LinkedIn profile. At the end of the day, it's also a lot about the conversation you might have with someone and the way you're able to articulate your value. And I think that's in competitive markets, I think it's important to showcase why your value might be different than other people's value and what you can contribute to an organization.
Excellent, Joe. Yeah, exactly. First impressions last forever. And that goes in person, that goes in paper, and that goes virtually. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next session. Another comment comes from Andrew Hutchinson. If too many employers move to an employment model relying upon contractors, how can a candidate in that system grow their profits and build a career? Many contractors I know are having trouble with that.
Yeah, I think, Andrew, this is something that's kind of almost like in process right now, as we're seeing it's like unfolding in front of us. I don't know is the short answer to your question, because I think employers, they're looking at it from one perspective of how do I acquire talent? How do I maximize my dollar in terms of my organization and my bottom line to, if it's a shareholders, if it's a startup, whatever it might be. So this is a really challenging piece of element that's evolving as we see that. But the networks become critical because a lot of these contractor roles are based on referrals. I think so. How do you improve and build your personal brand around the skill set that you have? And it's blending a depth of knowledge in a space, but also that breadth of skills that we talked about in that first section of the area of the skills area, right? Those human capital and human skills that we mentioned. How is your ability to work with others? How is your ability to work in teams? How fast can you move and project manage issues? How do you demonstrate productivity? But I think this is an interesting one to follow and observe because we have competing entities and needs of these organizations trying to figure out how to maximize the projects that they have and solve a problem and where the talent comes into play. So I think this is going to be an interesting one to operate and to operationalize and also monitor over the coming years.
All right, excellent, excellent. So it's 6:30, so we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to stay on target and hop into our breakout sessions after that. Next question comes from Marajema Parak. Apologize my pronunciation if I didn't correct it, if it was not correct. Her question is, are employers assessing skills differently? Essentially, how have employers previously determined if you had quote unquote soft skills, that is problem solving, creativity, etc., and how are they likely to do that in the future?
This is a phenomenal question, and I think this is really shifting right now. I think this is also a source of a lot of issues around topics of equity and access, right? Because I think many times you hear companies say, we're looking for someone with the right fit. And that sometimes would code for other things, or they didn't understand, or they were kind of going on feel and not basing it on concrete things like we're looking for these kinds of skills, or we're going to evaluate that by really casual conversation that is very different based on the candidates we're working with. So we've seen some technology creep into this space, trying to evaluate or assess technical skills or some soft skills. Software that is AI focused, which also has its own issues around bias and implicit bias, try to kind of take out some of the arbitrary or subjectivity of recruiters in evaluating talent and really looking at critical skills, both soft and technical. That has its issues as well. So I think what we're seeing is companies thinking about how do we allow candidates to show they have this. So we're, in some industry sectors, we've always seen case questions, like in consulting, management consulting. We're going to see probably more of that in different industry sectors. How do we allow the candidates to show us that they have these skills? So we're starting to see the recruiting timelines go earlier in terms of like first year and second year students to allow them to showcase what those things are in different scenarios, hackathons, and I see John Pershing here, sponsoring different hackathons and opportunities. So we're allowing students to show that. And I think with as you become alumni and work in the workforce, the work that you do and the contributions you make to your company are going to be more paramount than anything else, because you can point to those examples as evidence of working in a team, having high emotional intelligence. So it's an interesting area because I think candidates are going to be asked to think of very concrete examples of when they demonstrated emotional intelligence, when they've demonstrated an ability to be sensitive to DEI topics and initiatives, and when they've worked in diverse settings or worked with groups of people that were different than themselves and how they navigated those and how they paid attention to the different nuances that come with working in diverse teams. So very experiential in one case of being able, putting candidates through those paces of showing that they can do those things in different cases, as well as really pointing to continued evidence to back up, especially on the soft skills side, how they can evidence to showcase that they have those as well. And this is where the network comes back into play. Because if you have a referral from people that can articulate and really advocate for you, I think that makes a big difference as well, because employers and recruiters will look at referrals really critically as a way to source talent, because they can rely, and it lowers their risk if they can say, these are people that are good people that work in good teams that have a priority of diversity, equity, and access. So I think all of those pieces are going to be elements of that. But this too is evolving as we're speaking, because of how to use technology better and how to use different areas to really advance the space of recruiting. It's a big industry and a big business to figure out this talent recruitment piece, because I think we're seeing sometimes a misalignment of the talent and the organizations, and how do you match that up to fill the existing jobs in certain industry sectors.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe, for that Q&A. wonderful, wonderful responses. All right, so we're going to transition to the next stage of our program, 6:35, right on time. Again, we're going to encourage your use of raising your hand or using the chat option. If you have any questions, you can find the person named University of Rochester, and they could help you with any technical difficulties as we transition when we get to that point. Since we're on the topic of virtual networking, I just wanted to bring up one or two quick comments as well. As we start to reopen the world and go back into in-person meetings, it's always important to frame your meetings as far as what are the purpose of your meetings, right? So if you're networking and you're a new alumni, you're networking, are these meetings going to be in person? Are they going to be one-on-one? Are they going to be via Zoom? Or some are doing Skype, some are doing WhatsApp if you're international. So always keep in mind, what is the purpose of the meeting, especially when networking? Because you definitely want to be able to analyze how the meeting's going. You want to see, are there any questions or action items that you should take from the meeting? Are there follow-up steps? You want to definitely track that, take some notes, because if you have a meeting with someone, you never know that with that first impression lasting forever, you may not get an opportunity to meet them again in person or virtually. So definitely a great opportunity and area of growth for some to get in front of that screen and be okay to just be one-on-one and not be afraid of silence. And so we're not going to have any silence in our breakout session, so we don't have to worry about that. But sometimes when you have just two people talking, you have that whole communication dynamic of connecting.